Our first speaker pretty much needs no introduction, all right? He received his DDS degree from the University of Texas, San Antonio in 1993 and has a certification in Integrative Medicine that he received from the American College of Integrative Medicine and Dentistry in 2010. He is the past president of the IAOMT. He serves on the board of directors, and he also works for many of our subcommittees as well. All right, he received his Mastership Award for the IAOMT in 2013, and he's actually helped draft and write several of the Academy's brochures on fluoridation and has done scientific review for ozone for the Academy as well. He has lectured nationally and internationally on the science of biologic dentistry, and he's received countless accolades for his work all over this country, so I could go on and on about him. I'm not going to do that. We'll waste a lot of time, all right? So it's my absolute honor, all right, and privilege to introduce today's first speaker, all right? My good friend, all right, from Austin, Texas, please welcome to the stage, Dr. Griffin Cole.
Good morning, everybody. 3 weeks ago, I was in Nashville for a legislator meeting with Amanda and Becky from our academy and my good friend Stuart Cooper, who I hope is here from the Fluoride Action Network. He's in the back. And it's a large meeting that happens yearly with legislators from every state. And it's a huge exhibit hall, 5 times the size of this one, with every group you can imagine. The ADA, C-SPAN, you name it. Everybody's there. So I noticed that our exhibit is right next to C-SPAN, which is kind of neat, right? Because they're doing little videos of people just to say, just give us like 15 seconds of what is your thing that you want to see happen this year. So, of course, I got in front of the camera and I said, I want to see fluoridation end. And the guy asked me, he said, what's going on with that? He goes, because, you know, I see the ADA exhibit, I see the AGD, and they're all saying that it's great. And so that's when I got pinned. And I said, listen, go ask them, just ask them, can you tell me what study shows that it's safe and effective? That's all I want to know. And they're not going to be able to answer that question. I went on and on about our academy, and I did my usual thing. The next morning, he grabs me and says, hey, after I left yesterday, I went to your website and I was really impressed. And then I went to your academy's website and I was even more impressed. He goes, and then I went to the ADA's website and you were right. He goes, there was so much stuff on there that just didn't make sense. And I told him, I go, you just made my week, because I tell everybody that and nobody does it, and C-SPAN ran with it. So hopefully there's going to be more coming from that. I was very thrilled that he actually did his due diligence. Okay, this is a very bold title, and I sort of stole it a bit from 2 doctors, Frederick Exner and George Waldbot, 2 guys who wrote a book called The American Fluoridation Experiment. So this is an honor to them. Dr. Exner was a very vocal, outspoken opponent of fluoridation and even sued the AMA in court and lost. But this was the quote that he said while he was in court in 1974. He said, I am regarded all over the world as the world's best informed authority on fluoridation fraud. I am certainly not, but I have put together some pretty good science here, so I want to earn this bold title if I can. I have several videos. They're all pro-fluoridation, and I did that by design because I want you guys to see what's out there. And I promise I'm not going to stop them and interject at any point. I'm going to let you guys just enjoy them, and then we'll talk after. This first one is, all of these, by the way, are from the ADA website. And I'm not an ADA member, so I had to get a buddy's code to get on the site. It's become kind of difficult to get into the fluoride section. I think that's by design. But I was able to get on and get some pretty cool videos here, and this first one is the longest one. It's only 2 minutes. All my other videos are very short. But I want you to watch this and pay close attention to what they say.
Fluoride in our water is a good thing. Here's why. Community water fluoridation is considered one of 10 great public health achievements of the 20th century. In fact, over 100 national health organizations recognize the public health benefits of fluoride in our community water.
It's so important that we prevent tooth decay, which can be very serious disease if it's not treated. Water fluoridation helps adults as well as children. We have evidence on that. People are keeping their teeth longer, thank goodness.
It's effective.
I'm a mom, I'm a dental hygienist, and I'm also a researcher. And I like to wear all 3 hats. I always try to find the best science and evidence when I'm trying to make decisions about my children. And fluoride, especially through community water fluoridations, is one of those no-brainers.
It's safe.
Fluoride in community water is absolutely safe. It's been used for over 70 years to help prevent tooth decay.
Thousands of Americans are being misinformed about the safety and benefits of fluoridation. Now, if they go to a credible source, if they go to CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, if they go to the American Dental Association, if they go to ilikemyteeth.org, when they go to credible sources, they get the facts, the true science, and information.
I have absolutely no concern about community water fluoridation harming the children. I'm actually more concerned about not having fluoride.
Fluoride is natural. It's a fact that fluoride is naturally present in soil, rivers, lakes, and even the ocean. Water fluoridation is the addition of fluoride up to the recommended level for preventing tooth decay. It's similar to fortifying other foods and beverages, like fortifying salt with iodine, milk with vitamin D, orange juice with calcium, and bread with folic acid. It's preventive.
Why do you need to treat the disease when you can prevent it? It makes sense to prevent disease.
Iodine, vitamin D, calcium, folic acid, those are all essential nutrients. Stop comparing fluoride to that. It's not an essential nutrient. No disease process will ever occur because of a lack of fluoride. And lastly, using a comment like it's been around for 70 years is not a scientific explanation for its efficacy. And remember this face, because I'm going to show it to you later. You'll see.
Fluoride.
Okay, so let's go back one here. So this is the latest science right here. And I'm so excited that because the timing is beautiful. This is the hottest thing right now that's going on in, I think, medicine. Rivka Green, this publication was just published in JAMA. This is looking at maternal fluoride exposure during pregnancy. This is not the first. This is really the fifth in the last few years that has looked at maternal urinary fluoride concentration and the effects on the offspring. Okay, this was 512 mother-child pairs from 6 major Canadian cities, some that aren't fluoridated. And what they looked at here is they were trying to see what happens when they test moms that were in fluoridated areas, and even those that got it from other sources like black tea. And they found that there was a 4.5-point decrease with just a 1 milligram per liter increase in the concentration in urine. So just a 1 milligram liter per increase. This is on par with lead. It's that big. So when they looked at the other sources of intake, like from black tea, they also found that IQ drops in females as well, up to about 3.7. Now this study had lots of sensitivity analyses. This was a great study, in fact, so great that the editor of JAMA wrote a special editorial before the piece. And what he said was, we took this thing through the rigors. This is a good study. He knew people were going to come out and say something against it, and he has never done that in the history of that publication with him as editor. Not only that, they did a 12-minute podcast with him and another MD discussing it. And they were going on and on about, wow, you know, I don't know that I can actually recommend this anymore. These are 2 MDs that were pro-fluoride. As the editor is talking about it, and he's saying, you know, I'm just going to tell my patients probably from now on, especially those that are pregnant, you probably shouldn't drink fluoridated water. Dr. Rivera, who is the other MD on the podcast, said, well, you know, that's good, he said, but we need to talk about what low-income families who can't afford to drink bottled water are going to do. And that was the end of the podcast. And I loved it because he was talking about water fluoridation. It was huge. Now, of course, since this time, the ADA has come out against it and said this is one study. They tend to say things like this is Canadians, as if they're so different than Americans. And that's where we are. So this is huge, though. Again, I'm going to talk about the ones prior to this in a second, but this was big. So I'm going to go back now just a little bit. 2013, Richard Sauerheber. This gentleman started on this study in 1999. He spent 14 years putting this together. And he was looking at, he was showing how industrial fluoride, right? Not calcium fluoride, that's natural. I'm talking about the hydrofluosilicic acid, okay? He showed how industrial fluoride, once it converts to HF, hydrofluoric acid in the stomach, it causes gastric distress, right? So this was just one thing he was showing. He says that it gets into bone and it just changes, it causes irreversible problems. So he makes a statement on this thing, which I thought was really telling here. I'm going to read it here. A bold statement. He says, the policy adopted by the U.S. Public Health Service in 1950 remains encouraged by trade organization, the American Dental Association, dental insurance providers, and dental officials in the oral health division. But none of these groups has authority to chemically treat public water supplies. The rationale for the infusions remains based on early observations that were not supported by careful experimentation using the scientific method. When examined in detail, this proved to be an anecdotal, incorrect correlation. We got to talk about topical fluoride though, right? Because I know some of you are out there saying, well, okay, not all fluoride's bad. So I need to at least touch on this. There are some things, as we know, once fluoride hits the tooth, it converts hydroxyapatite into fluoroapatite. Some would argue that that's actually a weaker form of enamel. I'm one of those. So these are the things that the CDC says topical fluoride does. Enhances remineralization of carious lesions, inhibits breakdown, and has an antibacterial effect. Okay, it poisons the enzymes. Now, if you read all three of those, you don't have to drink a single drop of water to get those effects. Okay, this is all topical. And that's the point I'm going to make today, is that I'm not talking about topical. So let's look at fluoride's effects now. Just a few of them, by the way. Poisons enzymes, we already talked about that a little bit. It does increase glucose, calcifies the pineal gland, decreases thyroid function, impairs kidney function, lowers your IQ, bone fragility, dental fluorosis. It's also an endocrine disruptor. It's a developmental neurotoxin, which a lot of these studies are showing, and a cancer-causative agent. So this came out. This is this year, March 2019, silver diamine fluoride. I'm just going to touch on this because I know that a lot of people were asking about this yesterday in fundamentals. So it's a combination basically of silver, water ammonia, and fluoride, up to 5.9% fluoride. This was brought out for sensitivity, okay? It's not an anti-carcinogenic application. It's for sensitivity. But right now, they are actually looking at, the National Institute of Health has expended about $10 million to a few universities to conduct trials to decide whether SDF will become the first FDA-approved drug to treat dental decay. So I see something like this and I say, what could possibly go wrong? And there you go. It's pretty, isn't it? This is what it does. That is a case that was treated with silver diamine fluoride, and that doesn't go away. Those are permanent teeth. Yeah. Okay, on the CDC website, they say this: the safety and effectiveness of fluoride at levels used in community water fluoridation has been thoroughly documented by scientific and public health organizations using scientific reviews and expert panels. Yes, it has, and nearly all have shown no safety and no efficacy. Okay, besides the ADA, the CDC are the biggest proponents of water fluoridation. Yet if you look closely at their website, you'll see some contradicting comments. This is 2001. Fluoride's predominant effect is post-eruptive and topical. What's fluoridation? Pre-eruptive, systemic. The exact opposite. We are unaware of data about the additional protection from tooth decay that could result from consumption of fluoridated drinking water. 2012. Jim Frieden, who was the director at the time. So let's talk about fluoridation. Okay. By the way, keep in mind as I'm talking about this and you're hearing stuff come out here, 97% of the world does not fluoridate. 97% does not fluoridate. Okay. When it first started, there were early warnings from lots of people, but look at the two. The AMA and the ADA were very much against adding fluoride to the water. Okay. The first guy on the left is Jim Sumner, who's a Nobel laureate, very outspoken critic, and the next gentleman is George Waldbot. And George Waldbot wrote several books on this, besides the one I mentioned earlier. He also wrote Struggle with Titans in 1965 and The Great Dilemma in 1978, all about water fluoridation. Okay, now mind you, the ADA made very strong comments against this, and 3 months after they published a very strong comment was when they fluoridated Grand Rapids, Michigan. So this was already happening, guys. It was going, and there was nothing going to stop it. In Reno, when I talked about this, I went through the history of this fluoridation, so I'm not going to do that today, but I do want to talk about two men, because I think these are two very important men in this whole issue. This first guy, Frederick McKay, is a dentist from Colorado Springs, and I believe this gentleman started off with altruistic meaning. Okay, he was trying to figure out why all the citizens in his city had these brown spots on their teeth, yet had no cavities, virtually no cavities. So it was a 30-year investigation on this guy's part. I think he was truly just trying to figure it out. And word got out that he was doing this work, and it stretched all over the country, and I won't get into it, but if you want to ever get into this stuff, it reads like a mystery novel. It's unreal, all the people who got involved and got this rolling. So Frederick McKay, I think, had good intentions. This man did not. This is Edward Bernays, and he was the master of PR. Sigmund Freud's nephew, and it's no accident that he employed a lot of Freud's teachings in affecting our minds. I'm going to show you a few quotes from him in a second that are very telling about how powerful this man was. This man was the one that was hired to make smoking popular, particularly in women, because men were smoking back then, but women, it wasn't quite as cool. So this guy was so brilliant. There was the most popular pack of cigarettes had an ugly green color to it. And he thought, how am I going to make this? It was just ugly. So he got in touch with people in Hollywood making movies and convinced them to have the actresses wear outfits, dresses, and blouses that had that same color green. Then they started smoking, and all of a sudden it became popular. This is brilliant how he planned out to make things happen. And the same thing happened with water fluoridation. Look at some of these quotes here. We are governed, our minds are molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of. In almost every act of our daily lives, whether in the sphere of politics or business, and our social conduct or our ethical thinking, we are dominated by the relatively small number of persons. It is they who pull the wires which control the public mind. Propaganda becomes vicious and reprehensible only when its authors consciously and deliberately disseminate what they know to be lies, or when they aim at effects which they know to be prejudicial to the common good. This is the man that was behind all this, okay? There was plenty of scientists that got involved and plenty of other people, but Ed Bernays was the one who got this stuff rolling, okay? All right, this next video I want to show, there is a pediatrician named Dr. Aaron Carroll. He runs a website, or I guess a YouTube channel called Healthcare Triage. He is a professor of pediatrics at Indiana University, and apparently he knows everything. He's got lots of videos out there. I just picked a couple here. But once again, pay close attention to how he says things here.
To the research. Overwhelming evidence has existed for over 60 years that proves the efficacy of water fluoridation. Some of the best studies come from the early days of fluoridation because it was easier then to find groups of people who were not exposed to any fluoride sources. In a 15-year landmark study from Grand Rapids, Michigan, children who received fluoridated water from birth had 50 to 63% less tooth decay than children from a nearby city in Michigan who drank non-fluoridated water.
Okay, first of all, it was a 5-year study. Supposed to be 15 years, but after 5 years, those who were in charge of this claimed there was such a demand for it, and we have enough evidence, so let's just go ahead and do this. So it was not a 15-year study. Those numbers, by the way, are highly inflated. 50 to 63%. I think that number mostly came from Harold Hodge, who was one of the main guys behind this too as well. He was the head of the Manhattan Project, long history on him, but I think those numbers come mostly from him. And that's hardly a landmark study, by the way. So let's talk about the landmark study here. So 1986-87, the National Institute of Dental Research, did this huge study. It was like 40,000 school children aged 5 to 17 years. This was a pretty good study as far as the actual sample size. And what they found was that there was about an 18% less decay rate in fluoridated areas, okay? Up to 32% age 7, okay? But I want you to pay attention. So this is the ages of the children, and this is the percent of decay. This is relative difference. So you can play with science a bit, and David Kennedy touched on this yesterday in fundamentals about how you can leave out data points, right, and make things look any way you want to. The relative values are an average of all samples in each age group. So it's all lumped together, And you can skew numbers based on even just a few readings from certain children. It's not the absolute value. Let me show you what the absolute values graph looks like. Okay, not much different, right? But notice the y-axis numbers. 1.4 is the highest here. On the other one, it was 35. Okay, so what this is here, let me show you this. The absolute value is the average for one child's mouth. So there's a total of 128 tooth surfaces. So one child's mouth, you measure how many surfaces in those 128 tooth surfaces, and this is the number that you get, which is much, much lower, right? So let's put them on the same graph. That's the only way to really compare these two. Look at that. That was the difference in areas of fluoridation versus non-fluoridation, not this. So you can play with numbers really easily and make it seem like it's a really great deal. Okay, there's a couple problems with the few studies that tried to prove that fluoridation worked. As I showed you earlier, the trial's too short. 3 to 5 years is not enough time. 10, 15, but again, they don't do blinded trials, so you're not going to ever get true results anyway. But the one thing you guys may not know is that fluoridated children, typically their first molars will come in 6 months to a year after those in non-fluoridated areas. So here's what you do. You get your readings early on when they turn age 6. You got a lot more tooth surfaces in non-fluoridated areas. So it's already not a fair. It's apples and oranges. So this is clever how this is done. So I'm going to play this next video, and it's Dr. Bill Moss. And at the time of this, he was the head of the CDC Oral Health Division. So he'd fly out to certain counties that were considering adding fluoride, and he would give his testimony. This is so obvious, it's laughable, but I'm going to go ahead and play it for you guys. It's worth seeing.
And the community water fluoridation is effective. Approximately 25% reduction in tooth decay. It's safe. On that, I'm not going to give you any percentage because it is absolutely safe.
Would you expect the incidence of fluorosis to increase in our community?
Yes. Yes, I would expect you would have more children with white flecks on their teeth. I would expect that when you looked at those children, you would think that their teeth were very attractive.
It's absolutely safe. On that point, I'm not even going to discuss. So this is what he thinks is attractive. And, you know, whatever. I know he's not talking about severe and moderate, but even mild and very mild, it's not really all that attractive. As most of you know, the EPA, who does not regulate, they do not regulate additives in water. Okay, if they were to do their true job of disease control, fluoridation would be ended immediately, just based on the NRC panel's recommendations that the MCLG, the maximum contaminant level goal, that's the level where you can guarantee safety. Anything above that, maybe not. That level or below, it's like, what, 1 in a million kids might have the effect, so you can guarantee safety. Well, you guys probably know that it's at 4 milligrams per liter. And what the NRC panel back in 2006 recommended is that it should be 0. So nothing's being enforced. Okay, you guys also know this, that in 2015, the EPA and Health and Human Services lowered the safe level of fluoride from the 50-year established range. It was 0.7 to 1.2. Places like Chicago were probably even a little higher than 1.2. But they took it down to a maximum of 0.7 because they were admitting there's too much fluoride already. Well, if you look at that number at the bottom there, it said 40, at that time we knew that 41%, every 2 out of 5 children had fluorosis. But now some would argue that it's this high. And the NHANES is called the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey. It's a group that basically grabs all the demographic data, health indicators, other information, and they just look at what's going on and they give reports, okay? And according to their last report, that's how high it is. Now, that's not necessarily full science, so we're going to try to get into that. So Chris Neurath, Hardy Lineback, and Bill Osmondson wrote this study here in the Journal of Dental Research. This year, March 2019, Chris Neurath, who's a brilliant researcher from Yale, I talked with him, and he was telling me that the numbers are so bizarre that it can't even be, it's not possible. So when you're looking at this here, you know, they did these panels. In 86, 87, it was 22%. Then it was 41%, as I mentioned in that latest one. And now they're doing the 2011 and 12 surveys, which are now up to 65%. So extremely high, which is maybe true. Look at the moderate and severe, though, from 1.2 to 34.4%. So Chris said, listen, there's no way this is possible. Those numbers are way too high. So they're looking at it. He told me, I can't share anything more with you, but we are going to come out with something very soon to either corroborate or give the actual numbers as to what's going on. But needless to say, it's definitely increasing. So let's go back in time a little bit. This is my second year in practice, 1995. And I read this article and I thought this was it for fluoridation. I was so excited because look at the abstract. Concerns about dental fluorosis and the paucity of detailed intake fluoride data. There was none. They were basically admitting we don't really have enough data on this. And here we are, infants are getting fluoride ingestion from water. What's going on? So I thought this was the end of fluoridation, and I was wrong. Then I thought this was the end of fluoridation. 2000, John Featherstone. This was a very reputable guy with all mainstream dentistry, and he came out and unequivocally said that the true predominant effect of the anti-carcinogenic activity is topically and not systemically. So this is in JADA. This is the journal for all dentists. I thought that was the end of fluoridation, and I was wrong. So let's look at some more recent things that are going on. Bashosh 2018, Environment International. This was a study where, again, they were looking at prenatal fluoride exposure, and they were looking at ADHD to see what kind of, was there attention issues here. So this was the method. It was 213 mother-children pairs. Again, looking at maternal urinary samples, usually through all 3 trimesters. And then they did child assessments, ages 6 through 12. So they were looking at the urinary fluoride of the moms and looking at the activity of the children, actually. And let's take a look here at their results. So, obviously, the higher maternal urinary fluoride, ADHD. Prenatal exposure, inattention, but not hyperactivity. So this was a really great study, and this, again, this preceded the one I showed you earlier. So we already had this in the books, and we had this one already done. Christine Till, community water fluoridation and urinary fluoride concentrations in a national sample, pregnant women in Canada. Let's look at the methods of this one. This was 2018, so less than a year ago, October, Environmental Health Perspective. By the way, every journal I show you, all peer-reviewed, okay? The ones I'm showing you to show that it has issues, problems. This was about 1,600 pregnant women. Once again, maternal urinary fluoride concentrations in spot samples. And they looked at a lot of other correlation coefficients. So they wanted to see things like as I mentioned earlier, tea consumption. Was there any other sources of fluoride? So they looked at that, and they looked at other intakes with regression analyses. So they're looking at all variables here. It's a very good study. And here's the results. Look at that. MUF values were nearly 2 times higher for pregnant women living in fluoridated regions as compared to those not. Okay, so this is just, again, this was another one showing that we've got issues with the moms drinking fluoride. Results are very similar to Bashosh's 2017 study, which I won't get into because he did 2, which they showed, again, IQ issues happening here. So when these come out, what happens is the ADA says things like this. That's Canada. When Bashosh did his, that's Mexico. So these are the arguments that they're using, and somehow, am I the only one that's going, really? I mean, that's good enough? That's how you can respond to this, that they're not Americans? This year, January, the Journal of Clinical Pediatric Dentistry. Look at this, fluoride intake of infants from formula. Okay, let's look at the results of this study. Look at this. This is crazy. This was minimally fluoridated water. The highest was 0.3. Remember, 0.7 parts per million is what's in all the municipalities all over the country. So 0.7 is what's everywhere. This was 0.3 at the most, some even lower. 4.4% of infants exceed the upper limit. And if they calculated using 0.7, look at that number, 36.8% of infants exceeding the upper limit. Okay, another study. Bellinger did an awesome review this past December 2018. And essentially, he was looking at the work of Bashosh and all the Chinese IQs. There's a lot of Chinese studies, guys, tons of them here, where they've come out. I think there's over 50 now between China and India, and some other countries here where they're looking at the same thing, IQ, fluoride intake. So here Bellinger does this study and says, you know what? There are 10 chemicals on the World Health Organization's list of the greatest public health concern which can adversely affect the brain. And he talked about things like air pollution, arsenic, dioxin, lead, mercury, pesticides. But he said, now I think we have to include fluoride on that list. We've all seen this or some form of this. Can anybody tell me which country's fluoridated and which isn't? These are decay rates. Take a guess. You can see there, right? The red are fluoridated. Doesn't it all look the same? Decay rates are going down worldwide for lots of other reasons, okay? Let's talk about maybe education, better home health care practices. There's lots of reasons, but it's not fluoride. Okay, remember earlier when I showed you the video and that last guy that had the hat? What did he say? He said, go to credible sites, CDC, ADA, ILikeMyTeeth.org. So I went to ILikeMyTeeth.org. And they do it kind of in a cute way where they have like a question posed by somebody and they give an answer. So this person says, you know, I found an article on the internet about something called fluorosis. Is that a reason not to fluoridate drinking water? Look at the answer. It found that mild fluorosis was not an adverse health condition, that it might even have favorable effects on overall health. All right, come on. First of all, that's a very bold statement to say, but let's follow the science there. I like to look at the endnotes. You should do this when you read stuff. Actually follow the citations. So let's see what that came from. Oh, it's a news release. Yeah, that's not science, guys. A news release came out from the ADA, and that's what they're quoting to answer that question. So, remember the first video again that I showed you with the guy with the hat? Well, here we go. This is when things get fun. This is the American Fluoridation Society. They formed in 2014, I think mostly as a reaction to the work of the Fluoride Action Network, and just the ground gaining of groups like ours and other people who are out there talking about that it's time to end this. And let me just point out some people for you here. This is Steve Slott, Chuck Haney, Johnny Johnson, the self-appointed president, Kurt Ferre, and Myron Alukian. That was the guy that had the hat off that said that you have to go to credible sites. So this next video is Johnny Johnson, and he's being interviewed by a hygienist, probably some kind of a podcast or something. And I want to tell you the question that she asked here, if I can do that first. The question she asks is, how seriously should dental professionals regard the efforts of fluoridation opponents? And this is his answer.
Very seriously. They have every opportunity and every ounce of malice or whatever reason they use in their body to try and twist this credible science to make it sound like fluoride is the worst thing on earth, that it causes every ill health that you could imagine of. The only thing they haven't claimed is ingrown toenails at this point.
Funny, huh? I love his backdrop. Well, that took some time to put that together, huh? His shirt closed pinned up on the blinds, Johnny. Wow. Yeah, by the way, I would say just the opposite. I hardly think that I'm coming from malice or trying to or that I'm trying to, you know, use ill methods to get the word out here, or Dave Kennedy or the whole Fluoride Action Network that's fighting all the time to try to inform people out there that this stuff is ridiculous. So it's a bold statement by him. So, okay. We all see this all the time, right? This statement that was coined by the CDC years ago, and everybody runs with it, right? It's the mantra of every Surgeon General and every opponent I ever faced in city council fights. They say this all the time, and it doesn't mean anything. What does the FDA say about fluoride? Well, you guys probably know this. It's unapproved, right? They've never approved any fluoride-containing supplement. It's actually illegal that I can write a prescription for fluoride, and you can go to the pharmacy and fill it. That should be illegal. And in fact, our academy, we paired up with the Fluoride Action Network a few years ago, and we petitioned the FDA to actually do their job. And all we asked was, could you just enforce the rule that you've never approved this? And it's not happening. Okay. I showed this before in Reno, but I felt like nobody really enjoyed it as much as I did. I felt like everybody's kind of like, okay, yeah. So I'm going to do it again, and maybe I can get a little better result this time. So FDA has never approved fluoridation, nor have they banned it. Okay, 1979, they transfer authority over all additives to the EPA. It's out of their hands. EPA neither approves it nor bans it, but instead they say, you know what, we don't want it either. So they transfer it over to the National Sanitation Foundation, NSF. They even give them some staff to say, you know what, let's do some studies, at least 20, so that we can make this thing called the NSF Rule 60. So we're going to send you some folks, we're going to do studies, we're going to have this cool rule, and when somebody shows that, they know that it's been tested. NSF says, we don't want to do that. No studies are done. Now please tell me this is funny to you guys. Yet they allow vendors of fluoridation materials to use the mark, a symbol of compliance with the NSF Rule 60. Is that not insane? Seriously, am I the only one who thinks that's crazy? Okay, thank you. Okay, this next video. I love when people use the word never, and they stress it like it's real important.
Fluoride has been studied for many, many years, and there's never been a scientific study that has determined definitively that fluoride is related to any health risk.
Okay, that's just flat out false. There's never been a study to show it's safe and effective. There have been tons of studies to show that it is not safe and not effective. So let me use the word never properly, okay? There has never been a single randomized clinical trial to prove that fluoridation actually works or is safe. There's never been a long-term follow-up, as I studied, that it actually worked. And in fact, in San Antonio, where I grew up, they started fluoridating in 2000. I was there trying to fight that, but we lost, and they did fluoridate. But Metro Health Department of San Antonio did indeed do a follow-up study 9 years later. And what they did, they spent $3 million, and they were looking to see had tooth decay actually dropped. And what they found was that was not true. And in fact, in some of the poorest parts of Bexar County, it had actually increased 13%. So decay actually went up after adding fluoride to the water. Last one, silicofluorides have never been FDA approved for ingestion, and they were never proven safe prior to dumping. You guys all know that, right? It is not calcium fluoride, it is not sodium fluoride. It's hydrofluosilicic acid or hydrofluorosilicic acid. It is a waste product from the fertilizer industry. The EPA will not allow it to be dumped in the ground. They made every plant install scrubbing stacks to capture the fluoride so that it can't go up in the air as well. Not allowed in the ground, not allowed in the air, somehow allowed in the water. And don't let fluoridationists or anybody tell you, yeah, Griffin, I get it, but please understand, once it breaks down into the body, it's the same fluoride as natural fluoride. That is not true, and that was just proven 44 years ago by Westendorf, who was doing his thesis, and he was doing his PhD thesis on the anti-carcinogenic activity of fluoride. He thought it was beneficial. He thought he might get some more good information on it. Lo and behold, as he's doing his research, he discovers that, wow, these silicofluorides that they're actually adding caused a higher absorption of lead in children and all kinds of problems. So look at this, the acetylcholinesterase, which is so important for our neurotransmitters to work, right? Look at this, influence of fluoride and fluoride. It was a great, he changed his thesis completely to this and showed that indeed it's not doing what they say they're doing it, and it doesn't break down like natural fluoride. We're going to touch more on that later, but I want to jump to a slightly different thing here. So every 5 years or so, the ADA has this interprofessional relations meeting. And I don't actually, again, I'm not an ADA member, so I had to get a buddy's code to get on the site so I could get this, because they actually do lock up a lot of their stuff. So even members have to pay to get some information. So don't be overwhelmed by this next slide. It's for context only, but I want you guys to see something. In their defense, and you shouldn't have to read any of this, in their defense, they are scratching out a lot of their rhetoric that they've said for many, many years. So I have to tell you, this is their words from their site, from that meeting, where they're literally crossing out things they've said. So let's get a little closer on some of these. So look at that. They crossed out that they endorse community water fluoridation as a safe, beneficial, and cost-effective public health measure. Kudos to them. They also crossed out that all communal water supplies that are below should be brought up to the level. They crossed that out. The last one, though, the third one, they had said that they recommended the continuation of controlled studies of the benefits derived from the fluoridation of water supplies. They crossed that out and they added this. They support ongoing research on the safety and effectiveness. So listen, I give it where it's due. I think they're realizing that the writing's on the wall, and there's just too much now, especially with this latest study. So this was 5 years ago that they did this. So they're about to meet again. We'll see what happens. Okay, let's see our friend again, Dr. Aaron Carroll. Let's see what he says now.
Bigger cause of fluorosis is likely that kids do sometimes have a habit of swallowing their toothpaste. Fluorosis is the reason that the American Dental Association recommends that children under 6 do not use more than a pea-sized amount of toothpaste. We assume that little kids are going to swallow it, and if they swallow a lot more than that pea-sized amount, they're more likely to get fluorosis. Toothpaste delivers a much more concentrated amount of fluoride than drinking water does. So the biggest cause of fluorosis is likely swallowed toothpaste, not water.
Okay, come on. Really, doctor? Come on. He's making this too easy. So let's talk about that. Bottle-fed babies, right? This is my biggest argument, I think, whenever I talk to somebody. There's no dose control. Okay, this is the only medication that we get without a prescription and with 0 dose control. So of course an infant that's bottle-fed is going to get so much more of the fluoride, since the number one thing in their diet is water, right? Mixed with formula. Look at that. Breast milk is extremely low in fluoride, probably by design, I'm sure. 0.004 parts per million at the most. So a baby bottle-fed baby is going to get 250 times the level sometimes. So this is the reason why. Forget everything else. There's no dose control. We cannot control what's going to happen to anybody, and certainly not infants. And I already showed you some studies on that already. Okay? All right, let's do some fun stuff now. This is where it gets fun. So I like to go into the fluoridation facts, and again, I got access through a buddy's code and paid some money because they took down the fluoridation facts shortly after our meeting in Reno. I'm not taking credit for that. I'm sure it was the Fluoride Action Network, and again, this ground gaining, this swell, if you will, but they took it down. It was off the website for, I think, a little less than a year. They revamped it, and they brought it back, but they're requiring their members to pay for it. Now, why would you do that? They also added to this new fluoridation facts, they added several pages basically talking about groups like us. And they were saying there's a lot of anti-fluoridation out there with quasi-science, they like to say. And so we're going to address all these issues, and to their credit, they do, and I'm going to cover a few today. But this is one thing right here that was in there. It says, what standards have been established to ensure the safety of fluoride additives used in community water fluoridation in the U.S.? Okay? Here's the answer, right? I don't have to read it all for you guys, but they're saying that the 3 additives used, it's not 3, it's 1. It's fluorosilicic acid here. It's not sodium fluoride. Maybe sodium fluorosilicate, but definitely not sodium fluoride. But they say it meets the safety standards established by the American Water Works Association. Okay, and the NSF, remember the NSF, how valid that is? So let me show you a little something here now. Same thing. Then they do a fact. And they say it meets safety standards, and it ensures that the safety of products added to water for its treatment, thereby ensuring the public's health. Okay, it's a bold statement. Let's follow the science here. Number 4 is the end note. Okay, it's the American Water Works Association. Okay, I don't know, I looked into it. It was founded in 1881. Their key mission, advocate for safe and sustainable water. That's their key mission. So if that's true, then it's time to walk the talk, because you're not doing that. 2011, we were having a big fight in Austin, and it was because they were talking about how they were going to lower the level. So that's when they first announced it. We're going to lower the level to 0.7. So I thought, this is it. So we did a couple news stories. We went to city council. But in our little quest as we were looking at things, we found this MSDS sheet from Mosaic. Mosaic is the company that sells to most of the cities that are fluoride that they add to the water. But I want you to see this one thing, and I'll make it big for you guys. They actually added a warning about fluorosis and even some other things like bone changes and osteomalacia. Now, why would you do that? The MSDS sheet is for the workers. It's to let them know that you're working around some caustic stuff, and this is what could happen. Fluorosis is for children. So I'll tell you why they did it. They're washing their hands. They're done. They know. They see the writing on the wall. So once they did this, now it's on the cities. And I thought that was going to be awesome, because I could go to them and scare them a little bit and say, guys, it's now on you entirely. If children and moms get together and say, you know what, I've had enough, I don't like this, I'm going to sue, you're going to be liable. They just rolled their eyes. Incidentally, Mosaic had to pay nearly $2 billion in 2015 to settle some lawsuits in Florida for some hazardous waste problems, if you will, here. 6 Florida sites and 2 in Louisiana. But you know what? They've got the money. Okay, this is a letter. Again, I'm going to make it easy to read, guys. I'm just giving you context here. 2016, this is essentially a letter from the ADA to the Institute of Environmental Health Sciences. They were doing a report on carcinogens, and they were looking at fluoride. And the ADA said, you know what, on behalf of all of our members, we would love to give you information to show you that there's not a problem. So let's look at it. Last April, the U.S. Public Health Service noted there was no compelling evidence that fluoride is associated with osteosarcoma. So they're saying there's no evidence showing that fluoride can cause bone cancer. So we got to follow those two, right? There's 4 and 5. We got to follow those. Okay. One's a press release, and one is a statement. Okay, you cannot make a bold statement like that and then endnote it with a press release and a statement. That's not science. Now this has got to be good. So they say it was, this announcement was based on a 4-year evidence review of the effects of fluoride on human health, including any potential links with cancer. After careful review, the literature does not support classifying fluoride as a carcinogen. Again, very bold statement. Certainly this one's going to be science. Oh, no, it's a recommendation. Okay. So let's get into this a little bit. Back in Reno, I talked about how I went through all the references, 359 references. 98 of them, which is about 26%, were basically things like what I just showed you. Statements, letters to the editor, internal documents, graphs. And the majority of the other science, of their other references, was from a thing called Carey's Research, which is not a peer-reviewed journal. So, but they say this, right? Generally accepted, peer-reviewed scientific information. Okay, so let's look deeper into this now. This is one of the statements there. They're saying, fact, as discussed throughout this document, the best available scientific evidence consistently has indicated that fluoridation is safe and effective. And look, of the thousands of credible scientific studies, none has shown health problems associated with the consumption of optimally fluoridated water. Seriously? None? I mean, if they want to say, you know, we've got a few of our own, I would go with that, but none? So no valid studies. Look, according to the Fluoride Action Network, there are over 270 fluoride studies on the kidney alone, 140 on the liver, 350 on fluoride's effects on the brain, 130 human, 200 animal, and 33 cell studies. So are all of these aren't credible? Okay, let's do a little bit more here. Don't worry about everything that's blanked out. We don't care about that. All we care about is this, again, from Fluoridation Facts. It's an effective and inexpensive means of obtaining the fluoride necessary to prevent tooth decay and reducing tooth decay by 20 to 40% in children and adults. So let's look at some of these end notes. Number 3, recommendations. 22, it's them. They're citing themselves. This is silly. Okay, let's do some more. By the way, I'll show you here in a second. When they do start to cite some things that sound like they're pretty good, I'll get into that here. But the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force recommends the clinical use of oral fluoride supplementation starting at age 6 months through 5 years for children whose water supply is deficient in fluoride. We got to follow that end note. It's a final recommendation statement. You see where I'm going with this? I mean, we get it, right? Okay. We'll do more, though, trust me. This is a really neat graph that I found. This is in JADA 2009, and what you're looking at here is the levels of fluoride in the water, fluorosis, which is sort of that purple color, and decay rates. Look at this. When it's less than 0.3, fair amount of fluorosis, ton of decay. 0.3 to 0.7, a little more fluorosis, ton of decay. 0.7 to 0.12, more fluorosis, high decay. Look at this, greater than 1.2. High fluorosis, the highest amount of decay. This is in JADA. I don't understand. Did nobody read it? Or did people go, just another graph? This is my life. Okay, This next video, I actually think this gentleman sounds eloquent. If you guys pay attention to the Johnny Johnson video, it was poor grammar, it didn't make sense, he was trying to be funny. But if I heard this guy, I actually buy in, I do. But listen to what he says about other groups.
It really does confuse people, because if you let's say you happen to go to Google and just type in fluoridation or water fluoridation, due to various means, one of the first ones that's going to pop up is an anti-fluoridation group, and they've got a lot of somewhat quasi-scientific information they put on that really confuses the public. And so it's made it much more difficult for us to make sure that people get the real science and the real facts behind this. It becomes a really emotional issue when really it should just be based on science.
Let's go to the science. Okay, again, this is from Fluoride Facts. Does fluoride as provided by community water fluoridation inhibit the activity of enzymes in humans? And they're saying it has no effect, right? The best available scientific evidence has not indicated that it has any effect on human enzyme activity. Listen, you can go do a Yahoo or Google search, and this is what pops up. And every single one of those I followed, those were all peer-reviewed journals showing effects on enzymes. Okay? Does the ingestion of optimally fluoridated water adversely affect the thyroid gland or its function? It does not, according to them. Look at the fact. A number of systematic reviews completed in the last 10 years have looked at a possible association between exposure to fluoride and thyroid function. Yes, they have, and all showed a definite association. Okay? This is what they refer to for almost all their science, the SCHEER, Scientific Committee on Health and Environmental Risk. This was a group that was commissioned by the European Commission, the EU, and they said, let's look at a critical review on all of the evidence with all the problems that fluoride supposedly causes. And so they looked at everything, right? So you'll see them refer to them a lot. But I'm going to go through this in a second, and you'll see they're not quite covering everything. So look at this. This is what they say. It's stated that a systematic evaluation of the human studies does not suggest a potential thyroid effect at realistic exposures to fluoride. We got to follow that end note. They're citing themselves. Okay, so we're going to do some science. 2018 scientific reports. Impact of drinking water on human thyroid hormones. Okay, case control study. What they did was they were looking to see what happened to T3, T4, and TSH in people with thyroid disease. And the major finding of the study, TSH levels are higher with higher fluoride concentrations. Even in low fluoride areas, higher fluoride, higher TSH problems. Look at this one, Springer Plus, peer-reviewed. It's changed name, but it's the same journal. 2014. A comparative study of fluoride ingestion levels, serum thyroid hormone, TSH level derangements, fluorosis, all these things, right? What they found? Serum fluoride concentrations significantly altered thyroid hormones, T3 and T4, and TSH concentrations. Here's another one. Look at this journal, Journal of Contemporary Oral or Dental Practice. This is a reputable trade journal in mainstream dentistry. And they even talk about this, thyroid hormone derangements, okay? So I don't understand how this is in a journal that mainstream dentistry likes, and they still don't acknowledge this. Let's keep going. This was the Canadian study that I showed you earlier, Christine Till. But let's talk about it in a little bit more detail here. So these were the methods. They looked at nearly 7 million adults. Okay, 7 million in Canada, aged 18 to 79, who are not taking any thyroid medication at all, right? They measured again urinary fluoride concentrations, and they looked at the TSH levels. And let me show you this here. So keep in mind, fluoride is going to beat iodine to the thyroid every time, especially when it's deficient. Okay, it's the most reactive halogen on the periodic table. It's the most reactive element on the entire periodic table. Is consumption of water fluoridated at recommended levels harmful to the kidneys? Okay, remember there are 270 studies on the kidney alone. Answer, has not been shown to cause or worsen kidney disease. And here's their fact. So they say right here now that it's all pretty good. And they're right about that first comment, that approximately 60% of the fluoride absorbed by adults is removed by the kidneys. That's true. But they're not talking about hydrofluorosilicic acid, are they? So, but here they say, however, several large community-based studies of people with long-term exposure, up to 8 parts per million, which is a high amount, have failed to show an increase in kidney disease. They got 2 references there, so we got to follow them both. So this first one is from 1956. Not that there's anything wrong with the science in 56, but it's JADA, 1956. This other one, 1958. By the way, that first study doesn't even talk about kidney disease. I'm not even sure if it's a legitimate reference. Both of these are from JADA. I'm not saying that that's not a good journal. I'm just saying in 2019, these are the 2 pieces of science that you're using to defend your position. So let's go to recent science, 2014 toxicology. Effect of water fluoridation on the development of medial vascular calcification in uremic rats. Basically what they were looking at is to see what happens when they gave rats who had problems already with their kidneys fluoride and everything got worse, right? So the World Health Organization's recommended concentration, 1.5 milligrams per liter, becomes very nephrotoxic to CKD, chronic kidney disease, rats, and humans, we'll find out later. So it makes this very significant. Here's another one, 2018. Okay, human and experimental toxicology, exploring the role of excess fluoride and chronic kidney disease. This was a review. This covered nearly 100 years of studies on the toxicity of fluoride on human and animal kidneys. And they revealed there are absolutely direct adverse effects on the kidneys by excess fluoride, leading to dysfunction and damage. Okay, with the exception of the pineal gland, the kidney it gets the worst exposure from fluoride than any other tissue. Okay, let's go back a little bit. 1987, I chose this one because it was basically the study of one person. And I thought it was neat because they were looking at chronic renal failure probably induced by fluoride. And what they did was they followed this young patient who had a fairly long duration to high fluoride intake. It was high. And the absence of any other cause of renal insufficiency at that point made them feel this was a causal relationship. High fluoride, chronic renal failure. This is, by the way, this is the American Journal of Kidney Diseases. NHANES' latest review, okay, this is from the information from 2013 to 2016, okay? Remember I talked about NHANES earlier. So this study, let's look at the results here. Fluoride exposure may contribute to complex changes in the kidney and liver-related parameters. So of course they're saying that further studies are needed. We agree, but at least they're acknowledging this. Okay, here's another one. Does drinking fluoridated water increase the level of lead in the blood or cause lead poisoning in children? So let's see what they say. Answer, nope, not shown any association. Fact, no association, so we got to follow that end note, and it's them again. That's not good enough, guys. Let's look at some science. Masters in Copland, Neurotoxicology, 2000. Association of silicofluoride treated water, elevated blood lead. Make no mistake about it, it absolutely elevates lead levels. 2010, Toxicology, fluoride increases lead concentrations in whole blood and calcified tissues from lead-exposed rats. Here's another one, Copland and Masters, 2007. Confirmation of and explanations for elevated blood lead. Does fluoride at levels used in fluoridation corrode water pipes? No. Look at this. The fact that the process of adding fluoride to water has minimal impact on the acidity or pH and therefore will not corrode water pipes. We got to follow that and note. They're citing themselves. You guys remember Flint, right? Flint, Michigan, right? They had the FSA water going through the lead pipes. It leached out, caused all kinds of problems, higher levels of lead. There's lots of studies doing this. Flint was just one example. The CDC has yet to warn the public about this risk. 2009 happened in Thunder Bay, Canada. Look how the pH dropped, right? From 7.54 but it tripled the rate of lead leaching from pipes. 2010 San Francisco. Theirs was so bad that they had to add caustic soda to bring it back to non-corrosive levels. Okay, and in Reno, I said this. This was actually from Reno. I said, others to follow? Yes, there was. Sandy, Utah, this year, February. They had a snowstorm, which caused a large power outage, and their big fluoride tank dumped all of it at one time, 150 times the normal level, and people got sick. Okay, and there was lots of stuff that came out here, right? There was lead, arsenic, copper, all kinds of things. This was the letter that they sent to them saying, you know, you should check your water very carefully to make sure that the over-fluoridated corrosive water is removed. By the way, over the past 47 years, there's been 55 disasters. You guys probably can't see that. I'm sorry. It was supposed to be a little bit brighter. But it doesn't matter. This is just the years and cities, and these are disasters that have happened with fluoride. 55 of them, okay? I threw this in because it's kind of neat. It's from 1971. It was a Journal of Air Pollution Control Association. They were looking at effects on agriculture. And guess what they found out? Fluoride was the worst pollutant to affect plants and horticulture. This is our food supply. It was the worst. There's a great site called Toxipedia. Steve Gilbert, PhD, he does an amazing comment on the neurotoxicology problems with fluoride. I highly recommend that you read that. We got to talk about Calgary just real briefly, okay? In 2011, Calgary stopped adding water to their fluoride. They're now doing this fight to get it back in, okay? So what they did was they said, let's get the O'Brien Institute, a very reputable institute, to conduct a review of fluoridation. So they do. O'Brien comes back and says, there is a neurotoxic risk to the fetus. So what do? City Council votes to not show O'Brien's presentation. Let's just cancel it. This is crucial, guys, all right? 38.7% of Canadians have fluoridated water. So if this happens, it's going to definitely influence other areas, okay? Let me show you what they do. David Kennedy showed this in several slides. I'm going to keep it real simple. This is essentially what they tell you. They say, look at this. You ended fluoridation, and look at decay rates. The year you ended it, look at this. Well, let's look at the whole slide. Come on. Decay rates were going up anyway. So you just leave this part off. It's very clever, right? Leaving off some certain data points that are important. Keep in mind, too, with the exception of Yukon, British Columbia has the lowest percentage of fluoridated areas, like 1.17%, and they have the lowest decay rate. Okay, I'm a big fan of the Fluoride Action Network. I'm a fan of fan. This is what they say. Out of 196 nations, only 24 have fluoridation. 97% of the world's population does not fluoridate. 9 of these groups, these are 9 groups that used to be on those lists you would see where they'd say, these are all the people who support fluoridation. These 9 have dropped off. We're 9 down. We got many to go, but we are 9 down. Awesome sources out there. David Kennedy did Fluoride Gate. It's a great documentary. There's so many things to look at. I'm sorry, there's so much to go through. I hope I covered enough science for you guys. I want to thank you very much for allowing me to speak on this. Appreciate it.